I'm Lisa Archer from Pickle Pie Designs, and I created a special project for Creative Machine Embroidery. Today we're stitching a really fast and fun eyeglass case right in the hoop of our embroidery machine. This project features quilting stitches that are done in the hoop, as well as appliques. For this project, you'll need the following supplies. You'll need to choose a main fabric that will be on the background and the back of the eyeglass case. You'll choose a fabric for your flower applique and a fabric for your leaf applique. We use this batting alternative, which is a great product. It's very cushy, so it helps protect your eyeglass cases in the finished design. We're also using Sulky thread and Sulky's soft and sheer stabilizer. I have my stabilizer already hooped and the hoop attached to the embroidery machine, so we'll go over and start stitching. The first stitch sequence that goes down is a placement line that stitches directly on your stabilizer. And that placement line will tell you exactly where to place your batting and fabric. Okay, that stitch sequence is done, so we'll bring this back over to the cutting mat. And we'll place the larger piece of batting down over that placement line. You're going to cover the stitches completely and tape it down just a little bit so that it stays securely on the stabilizer during the next stitch sequence. And we're going to take one of our main pieces of fabric and just place that right over the batting. Tape it in place. And when that's nice and secure with the tape, we'll take it back over to the embroidery machine. This next stitch sequence creates these really pretty quilt lines on the fabric. We'll go ahead and trim that thread, get it out of the way. So the first part of this stitch sequence tacks the batting and fabric down to the stabilizer so that it'll stay nice and secure while the quilting stitches go round and round. And I love this type of soft and sheer stabilizer by Sulky because it is really soft inside your finished case. Okay, now that this stitch sequence is complete, we're going to change our thread. We're going to put a green thread in to stitch the stem of the flower. So now we're going to stitch the stem. Trim that thread before we continue. This stitch sequence is continuing and just creating a placement line for the leaf fabric. Okay, that stitch sequence has completed, so we're going to bring this back to the cutting mat. I'm going to clip that jump thread. And you'll notice right in this section, there's a placement line for your leaf fabric. So you'll take that fabric, place it over. I use tape for my appliques. You might want to use spray adhesive on the back of your fabric for this step. And you also have the option of adding a fusible webbing product to the back of your applique fabric if you prefer. I have that taped securely in place. We're going to bring it back to the embroidery machine to stitch down that fabric and create a cutting line. That stitch sequence is complete, so we'll bring it back to the cutting mat, and we'll use applique scissors to trim around the cutting line. Just remove your tape. Here's your applique scissors. Applique scissors have this great duck bill that helps hold the fabric up as you're cutting. Much easier to use when you're cutting appliques than a regular pair of scissors. You can just move your hoop around to help you cut. And this is a raw edge applique. So you don't have to cut right up against the stitch line if you don't want to. You can leave a small border of fabric, and that over time will get frayed and have a nice worn-in feel. So that's cut. Now we're going to place the applique fabric for the flower. On the top part of the project, you'll notice this big flower-shaped area that doesn't have any quilting. That's where you place your flower applique fabric. So we're just going to repeat the process that we did with the leaf fabric. Place your fabric over that section and tape it in place to hold it down. This is a really fun project to choose fabrics for. Your base fabric can dictate what your flower fabric looks like. I liked to have that contrasting look to it, so I chose colors that they worked well together, but they also contrast and show up against each other. I'm going to place this back on the embroidery machine, and I'm going to change my thread. I'm changing it to blue to match the quilting stitches. So this stitch is going to create your cutting line, but within the same stitch sequence, it will also create some swirls within the flower to give it a little bit of texture and fun. Okay, so that stitch sequence is done. We'll bring it back to our cutting mat. Take off the tape around the applique fabric, the flower applique, and we'll go ahead and trim around that. Again, this is also a raw edge applique, so you can leave a little bit of a border. You don't have to go right up against the stitch line. You can experiment with that and see what looks better to you. Cut the border larger to begin with, and if you don't like it, you can always cut smaller. Raw edge appliques are so nice because you don't have to be precise. Okay, so that's trimmed. We're going to take it back to the machine one more time and create placement lines for the next piece of fabric. So we'll bring that back over. Okay, those placement lines are stitched. They are tiny little stitches that you can hardly see. If you're not looking for them, you might miss them. I have them stitched here in a darker thread so you can see for sure where they are. There's one on the left side of the case and there's one on the right side. Those are very important lines to pay attention to. They are there to help you place the next piece of fabric. This is the back. It's a folded piece of fabric and you have a piece of batting sandwiched inside. You have to place this piece of fabric, the sandwich, directly on those placement lines. Don't place it above, closer to the top of the hoop. If you place it too far up, this piece might get stitched down during the next step and your eyeglass case won't open. It's very important to pay attention right there and have those placement lines, the fold of the fabric right on those placement lines. And we're going to tape this in place, and this is a piece that you have to tape in place carefully to make sure it's not going to move or shift. The more tape you use on this step, the better. In my studio, when I use this tape, I reuse it as many times as I can just to stretch it a little further. It's pretty tacky, so you can use it 2 or 3 times. Okay, so we have it taped very securely. We're going back to our embroidery machine to sew the next stitch sequence, which will tack that down. If you can raise the foot of your embroidery machine height a little higher, this is a good time to go ahead and do that. If not, you'll see that this foot it's below this fabric. So what you can do in that case is use a piece of tape just at the beginning there to keep that presser foot above the materials. If it gets caught under the materials, it could pull the whole thing apart as you stitch. So I'm going to place a piece on this side as well. Okay, and we'll sew the next stitch sequence here to tack that down. If you're using regular quilt batting instead of the foam batting alternative, your piece won't be as high, so you may not have that problem. Okay, now that that stitch sequence is done, we'll take this back to the cutting mat. You can go ahead and simply peel up the tape. It should pull off where the stitch is stitched over it. You can just work at it a little bit if you can't get all the tape off. It should come off pretty easily. Okay, so our final step here in the stitching process is to take your final piece of fabric, place it face down over your project and tape it in place. You can grab some of the tape that you've used below that, use that. Okay, we're going to take it back to the embroidery machine one more time. Okay, we're done with the final stitch sequence. Take our hoop off and bring it to the mat. What you'll do now is remove all your tape, take the project out of the hoop, and trim around the outside of the project, leaving a small seam allowance. And at that point, your project should look like this. I create a larger seam allowance around the opening so that when I turn the 2 pieces inside, I have more material to work with. So what you'll do right now is go ahead and open that side opening, turn your project inside out. Once you have it inside out, it should look like this, and you'll wonder where the pretty flower is. You didn't do it wrong. You have to turn it inside out one more time. But first, you want to close that opening. You can use fusible seam tape if you don't want to hand sew it. You can whip stitch it by hand. Or if you're in a real hurry, just leave it open. Nobody's going to know. So at that point, once you've done close the seam, the open seam, you'll turn it inside out one more time and have your finished eyeglass case. I'm so glad you joined me today. I had a lot of fun creating this project, and I hope you enjoy stitching it at home. Change the fabrics. They're great for people of all ages, or girls of all ages. Use fun fabrics for little girls or sophisticated fabrics for older girls. They're sure to love what you've made them.